Tonight on Mississippi Insight, the coronavirus surge shows no signs of letting up in Mississippi as cases soar in hospitals filled to capacity. A member of the White House coronavirus task force travels to Mississippi to see what's happening. The impact on school districts and colleges are laying out their plans to go back this fall. We're taking a closer look at how that will work. And to look at the front lines, how hospitals are handling the surge in patients and what it means for your care. Hello and welcome to Mississippi Insight. I'm Gerald Harris. Byron Brown has the week off. Thank you for joining us. COVID-19 is dominating the headlines this week. All-time high set in the number of daily coronavirus cases, hospitalizations, ICU use, and patients on ventilators, also at the highest level since the start of the pandemic. Governor Tate Reeves pushing for people to follow guidelines and wear masks, but not ordering a statewide mask ordinance. This past week, a member of the White House coronavirus task force, Dr. Deborah Birx, traveled to Mississippi, meeting with Governor Tate Reeves and other local leaders, including the mayors of Jackson and Vicksburg, to hear how the state is handling the surge in cases.
The encouraging news is there are certain measures that we can put in place, such as encouraging everyone to wear a mask, and I felt pretty confident when Dr. Birx talked today that they really believe, the entire Trump administration believes, that masks can make a real difference. And I see out in our communities, I saw it over the weekend on the coast, I've seen it some here in the metro area, more and more people are adhering to that. And the higher the percentage of compliance we get, the less transmission we're going to have in our communities. We spent several hours talking about next steps and options and what can we do from a hospitalization standpoint, what can we do in other areas. And so I don't want to belittle at all where we find ourselves today. One of the takeaways that I had today is while things are really bad here, they could be a lot worse. And if we don't, as a state, make good decisions now, and as individuals in this state make good decisions now, it could get a lot worse very quickly. Even when you look at our neighbors to the west and our neighbors to the east, we're in much better shape today than they are. And that's something that it's hard for us to keep in perspective because the only thing we're focused on is trying to protect all Mississippians. But she has the advantage of seeing the numbers in Texas, seeing the numbers in Louisiana, seeing the numbers in South Carolina, seeing the numbers in Florida and in Georgia and in Alabama. The second takeaway that I would say is she is very pleased with our mask mandate in the 13 counties that we have done so. She very much believes that masks can make a difference. The one other thing that she mentioned that we've got a lot of work, we got some conversations to have, is bars. You know, if you look at what's happened in other states, Texas has shut down all bars. I think Florida has shut down alcohol consumption in bars. And it became very evident to me that my Republican governor colleagues in those two states, all of whom are certainly competent enough to make their own decisions, but it seems to be a pretty strong recommendation that particularly young people who are going to bars and hanging out all night, for whatever reason, they tend to veer away from wearing masks while in bars and veer away from socially distancing, and that is not a good recipe for success.
The surge in coronavirus cases is pushing hospitalizations to an all-time high. Intensive care beds are filled up at hospitals around the state. Health Director Dr. Thomas Dobbs on the scope of the problem.
If we look at the daily number of patients admitted with a confirmed coronavirus, it's increased pretty significantly. As early as recently as June 14th, we were admitting about 40 patients a day with coronavirus, and now we're admitting on average 87 coronavirus patients a day. This is confirmed patients. The best thing we can do for our hospital is to keep from spreading in the community. Again, using masks, maintaining 6 feet separation, small groups only, and stay home when you can, and that'll make a huge difference. Goldman Sachs, no socialist enterprise at all, strongly endorses masking, and even a modest increase in masking could save our economy up to $1 trillion. Why in the world are we not doing that? It's absolutely maddening. So we'll continue to promote it as aggressive as we can, whatever strategy seems like it's going to be most effective, especially in those areas where we see the highest impact. We are definitely not using our tools to maximum efficacy. The tools that we have are very simple and very effective.
The surge is coming at the same time schools are making their plans to return this fall. I was there as Jackson Public Schools outlined its plan, which involves a lot of flexibility.
So what's the first thing that you see on the outside?
With the new school year just weeks away, preparation to open up schools during a pandemic has been outlined.
We feel the options outlined in this plan will help our parents and guardians make informed decisions as they register their scholars.
Parents will have choices for their students depending on the child's grade level. For elementary and middle school students, parents will choose between traditional or virtual instruction. For high schoolers, the choice is between hybrid learning or virtual instruction.
The hybrid model would include, or does include, an A-day, B-day rotating schedule.
On A days, 9th and 10th graders will learn core subjects, while 11th and 12th graders will learn electives, and this will rotate with the days.
Our plan is 100% of what we know today and what we're prepared to do today. As we know more tomorrow and next week, and even up until and after the start of school, we are committed to making adjustments as appropriate.
There will also be temperature checks, mandatory face covering, social distancing, and daily deep cleaning, among other safety measures. When we come back, a closer look at one school district's reopening plan. Districts big and small are offering different plans for returning. Melanie Christopher talked with Clinton Public Schools about its plans on returning.
Joining us via Zoom is Robert Chapman with the Clinton Public School System. Mr. Chapman, first of all, thank you so much for being with us.
I'm glad to be here.
Walk us through getting that task force together and then through your plan.
So Dr. Martin, our superintendent here at the Clinton Public School District, pieced together this task force that, like you said, is equipped with medical professionals, members of the community, teachers, parents, district administration, so that we could have an active voice that represents the total community here in Clinton, so that we could move forward with the best plan that we could put together as we go into these uncharted times. We've met twice. I believe the first meeting was June the 5th, where the entire task force of over 50 people met. We discussed what the goals were, what the overarching plans were going to be. We needed, in education, we always talk about benchmarks. So we talked about what benchmarks we needed to reach in order to put this plan together. Once we had those ideas put together, we met in subcommittees where we looked at various things from bus transportation to how we were going to feed our students, to what traffic would look like, to walking through hallways, to masks, to infectious diseases, and the first day of school. So once those subcommittees put together recommendations, we met again, I believe that was on possibly the 26th maybe, and on a Friday, and we hashed it out. It was a good 3, 4, 5 hour meeting where we tried to examine everything from the start of school to athletics and extracurriculars and virtual learning and technology. And once we weighed left from right, we put a plan together, and through that we started combing through everything of what's going to work, what's a little too far reaching, what gives us the flexibility to where if things get a little crazy, can we be flexible enough to move forward? Now, if things go perfectly and school goes right back to normal, we have that plan set as well. But the plan was always to be flexible. Dr. Martin always likes to say, our motto this year is, blessed are the flexible because they will not get bent out of shape.
It looks like you're going to a hybrid situation to start. Is that correct? You've divided them up into two groups.
Our hybrid situation, we're starting on August the 13th. Our first day of school initially was August the 12th, but we have moved that from, instead of having 3 days of that third week in August, to now that we're going to divide our students into two teams, Team Clinton and Team Arrows, that instead of having 3 days in that first week, we'll have 2 days to where Team Clinton can meet on the 13th. Half the student body can make it K through 12. We can kind of ease back into school. They haven't been in a classroom setting in over 4 months. So trying to jump right back into it is not necessarily too much to ask, but it's a tall task.
The classrooms themselves, I know we're talking from, kindergarten on up through high school. How are you gonna do that with social distancing?
So one thing that we've prided ourselves here at the Clinton Public School District is that when it comes to education, we're very innovative, we're very progressive. We love to push the envelope and ask more out of our students and our community. But this year, one thing that we're having to ask is that we go away from what we do here at Clinton, which has been a non-traditional seating type, where what we call flexible seating, where there are bean bags and couches and rolly type things, the little, I like to call them the little yoga balls,
yeah.
where the kids can sit on the yoga balls and bounce on them. And it allows for a new way of education. But with this year, we're having to almost do away with that and go back to the traditional way of setting up a classroom. Desks will be in rows, desks will be separated as far as possible. And again, having this hybrid setup will allow desks to be further away, students to be further away, limiting their exposure to each other and keeping that social distancing together. And that's K through 12.
What about your extracurricular activities?
So kindergartners through 6th grade, they get to experience library, art, music class, and physical education. And those classes will still meet. They will meet in their given area, their respected area. They will go outside. They'll still get recess. They'll stay within their cohorts. And so that way they get exposure to artistic ways of thinking that also help the mathematical ways of thinking. Instead of having the teacher, the music teacher, come to their homeroom, the students will, wearing their masks, they'll properly walk through the hallways, and they get to go to the respected areas where they get to have PE or where they get to have music or art class, because it's very important to get students moving about. They don't need to be stuck in a classroom for 7 or 8 hours. That's not healthy for the adults, much less the 8 or 9-year-olds. So if we can get them moving about, that's K through 6, that'll be very beneficial. The extracurriculars, when it comes to the secondary levels, this will all be taken in a building level, case-by-case basis. It looks different at each building. It looks different when it comes to the students that they have. Yearbook looks very different than band. Band and football are two very large things that we have going on right now in the fall, as well as cross country and volleyball, but it's going to look a little bit different as we move forward, and it will be case by case. Of course, we are going along with what MHSAA recommends. Previously this week, they voted on extending or pushing back the start of these sports 2 weeks. So the first game for football will be September the 4th, and those practices won't really officially start till the 17th. Cross country and volleyball, they will begin practice on the 10th. So we're trying to use this time wisely as we move forward to see what these extracurricular and elective classes will look like.
Are you going to do a temperature check? How will all that work?
Our daily procedures are going to consist of having daily temperature checks every morning, every student. The elementary students, we've seen how kids can fluctuate. So we're even thinking in the middle of the day around lunchtime, maybe checking their temperature again, just to make sure that any symptoms are not showing. And if they are, that we can work with the parents to ensure the safety of their students and our teachers.
Will there be after-school care available?
So here in Clinton, most of the after-school students, if they don't go home, we have a wonderful collection and selection of after-school care here in the city. We have talked to all of the major ones, the large ones, and what they're going to do is they're going to extend their summer program that typically ends right at the start of school. Since we're having to kind of start with this 2 weeks going in, they're going to extend their 2 weeks or their summer program an extra 2 weeks. So if children are on Team Clinton and they go Monday and Tuesday, well, they're not going to be at school on Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. The major after-school care facilities have said, we'll extend this 2 more weeks. And so on those days when the students are not at school, they'll be able to go to their location at a prorated price.
And I know you've been a former teacher. Let me ask you this. They are saying the Academy of Pediatrics has said it is important for the kids to get back into school because it is, socially as well as for their education. What about the mental health? How do you feel like getting back is going to be good for the kids?
Like I said earlier, we haven't been in school for 4 months. I mean, spring break hit, everybody went and had a great time. It was cool enough. It wasn't too hot. It wasn't too cold. And they were expecting to come back Monday and tell everybody about their trip to Memphis. But instead, the Monday ended up being a time where you're kept away from everybody and the world seems to be falling apart. Chicken Little literally was letting the sky fall. And it that's where we felt we were. We haven't seen these students in 4.5 months. They haven't been in a setting. So if we expect to jump right back in, we're kind of fooling ourselves. So what we're doing here in the district is we're going to take these first few weeks to get back into a routine. We're going to get back into this understanding of what expectations are put on our students. But the main thing that we're focusing on is the social and emotional well-being of our students.
Thank you so much for sharing what Clinton is going to be doing, and we'll stay in touch with you and keep informed if there are any changes there. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Welcome.
When we come back, a closer look at the front lines of the COVID-19 crisis in Mississippi and how the surge in cases is impacting local hospitals. This week, we learned that there are at least 41 confirmed COVID-19 cases among state lawmakers. At least 2 are in intensive care units, including State Representative Melanie Barton, Republican from the 109th District down by the coast. He's a Vietnam veteran and a Purple Heart recipient. Several of his fellow lawmakers have asked for prayers for their colleague on social media. We received the numbers of people hospitalized with COVID-19. Tonight, we're getting a look inside of one of Mississippi's biggest hospitals and hearing from frontline workers about the toll the surge is taking on healthcare workers. 12 News' Alex Love has the story.
I'm not gonna lie, we're all tired.
With 855 COVID-19 hospitalizations right now across the state, UMMC physicians have firsthand experience of feeling the burden.
For adult patients, we have 80 regular ICU beds. We have created some extra space, and they've all been full.
We have patients in the emergency department who need ICU beds. They're on ventilators. Some of them have been down in our emergency department for close to 24 hours.
With all these patients comes the issue of staffing enough people, and it's a struggle to keep up with capacity.
Resources are sometimes strapped. A nurse to patient ratio that's not always what we would like it to be. Those situations create a lot of extra stress. So we are really at a point where we can't, people can't have a break.
I spoke with one of the nurses and she'd walked between 7 and 8 miles that day, and it was only 2 o'clock in the afternoon. These patients require a lot of care, so by the time you work so hard on people and they continue to die, it's emotionally exhausting.
All doctors we spoke to agreed some of the stress on the hospital system could be lifted if the public would listen to health experts and accept that the coronavirus is a serious threat.
This is not a hoax. I've never in my 20 plus years of medical practice seen hospital wards full of patients with a particular infectious disease.
This coronavirus is not the flu. I have never seen our emergency department like this. We have never had to have an area of the emergency department dedicated to flu patients. I think the flu is much more predictable, whereas coronavirus seems to be affecting people who are otherwise healthy and middle-aged, in some cases having devastating effects.
When we come back, some interesting numbers just out in the race for the U.S. Senate. Now to the race for the U.S. Senate and a huge second quarter for Democratic candidate Mike Espy as he topped incumbent Republican Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith in fundraising. Senator Hyde-Smith still leads in overall fundraising this campaign cycle with $2.1 million compared to Espy's $1.4 million. The Senate race is a rematch of the 2018 special election when Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith defeated Mike Espy by 8 points. Thanks to Robert Chapman with the Clinton School District for joining us. For Melanie Christopher, Alex Love, I'm Gerald Harris. Join us next week for another edition of Mississippi Insight.